Alright everyone, today I'll be showing you all how to install the DayZ Standalone SweetFX mod. First of all, I better actually explain what SweetFX is. It's simply a shader suite that allows you to essentially cause a graphics overhaul in any game that supports DirectX 9, 10 or 11. And in this case, I would call it more of a colour injection tool because all it really does in DayZ Standalone is make the game look a lot sort of brighter and just a lot more pleasant in general. But a pleasant thing is actually it increases performance because it doesn't use the in-game anti-aliasing, which is at the moment pretty poorly optimized. So the first step is to download the files that you'll need, of course, DayZ Standalone SweetFX.rar. To access this, you will need something such as WinRAR to extract a folder to your desktop or wherever it is you're going to use it. But inside the folder that's contained in the RAR file is everything that you need to know and need to use. All the files that you need. I even provide some screenshots and in-game settings here, as well as comparison screenshots and useful files such as Steam set launch options. I'll keep that open for now actually. But first things first, once we've downloaded the files that we need to actually launch DayZ. And we need to modify our graphics settings so that the mod will actually work well with the game. Just so you guys know, I'm actually running DayZ at the moment in a borderless window, which is why you can see my taskbar right there. I prefer to run the game this way with SweetFX enabled because there's an issue with DayZ and SweetFX that when using SweetFX, if you try to Alt-Tab, the game will crash. If you try to change your rendering resolution, the game will crash. This also happens just having windowed mode enabled by default. So it's a bit of an annoying bug, but I'll show you some workarounds for that anyway. But the first things first, we need to go into our configure settings. We need to click on video, and the majority of these settings will depend on how good your graphics card is, but the most important thing is to have anti-aliasing disabled in the rendering settings. We also need alpha to coverage disabled, edge smoothing disabled. We need HDR quality set to very low because, well, this is another poorly optimized feature, and I'm pretty sure SweetFX actually implements its own HDR. Ambient occlusion also should be disabled because that just kills performance. Post-process quality is something that I think you will need to toggle with yourself. I have it to low, but if you disable it, it changes how the game looks a little bit. If you set it to very high, it makes things a lot brighter, but then again also a lot blurrier in the distance. I don't like it set to very high, so I prefer it at low. Please note though that if you do disable it, then bloom and rotation blur can't be used at all. They just won't work. So that's why I have it set to low. Again, with bloom and rotation blur, those are features that you will have to toggle once you have the mod working just to make it look perfect. I have my video memory set to auto, texture details set to very high simply because my graphics card can handle it. And my quality settings are all very high except shadows. Shadows destroys performance quite a bit. Clouds, I haven't really noticed the difference. But shadows is something that does decrease performance a lot, which is why you have it set to very low. I could disable it and increase performance even more, but as far as I'm concerned it doesn't look as nice. So really the quality and texture settings do depend on your graphics card as well as your rendering resolution. I like mine at 100%, but if you have a lower end graphics card you may consider running it at 75% or 50% depending on how good or bad it is. And the reason this is such an odd resolution, as I said before, is simply because I'm running the game in a window, a borderless window rather. So once we've done all those settings, the mod should function well with your game. And we're just going to exit out. Now the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to right click DayZ in your Steam library, click Properties, then click Set Launch Options. And as you can see I have a bunch of things in here, but we're just going to go ahead and delete those and open it back up again so it's empty, just for educational purposes. And we're going to go back into our DayZ Standalone SweetFX folder, go into Files, and set launch options, and as you can see I basically describe what every single launch option does in this text file here. And we will be using CPU count. There's actually one I forgot to mention which will be updated by the time this is done. No border, I'll add that there. We will be using CPU count is equal to 4. This the number 4 does actually depend on how many I think it's processors your CPU has. My CPU has 4 processors. AMD CPUs may have 8, 6, it does depend on your own system. Max mem is also something else that does depend on your own system. My computer has 16 gigabytes of RAM, but I only want DayZ to use 8 gigabytes, which is 8,182 megabytes. That's pretty easy. And the last one I'm going to add in is called dash no border. This means that when we run the game in windowed modes, there won't be a border around the window. It'll basically look like full screen. We're going to go ahead and click OK. There are other ones you can add, such as WinXP and No Splash, but those also tend to break DayZ a little bit, so I don't recommend them. Don't bother saving that. In fact, I'll save it. Why not? Next step would be to simply install the SweetFX files into your DayZ game folder. And to do this, all we'll need to do is open up the folder titled Drag Contents of this folder into DayZ Steam folder. We want to get all the files that we need, all the SweetFX files, and we need to find our DayZ Steam folder where the program files are, such as DayZ.exe. To do this, again, all you need to do is go to your Steam library, right click DayZ, go to Properties, click on the Local Files tab, and then click Browse Local Files. This will bring you straight to the folder where all your DayZ PC files are stored, program files are stored, and we're going to drag all the SweetFX files straight into there. Now, in the SweetFX files, I do also explain a few things, such as how to disable SweetFX. Just to disable it, all you need to do is get a file called d3d9.dll and drag it to your desktop. As long as it isn't in this folder, SweetFX will not run. When you want it to run again, you just drag it back in, and that's fine. The game will use SweetFX. Another file explains that you can actually toggle SweetFX on and off by hitting the button F11. Another thing is when you try and take screenshots, Steam won't pick up the SweetFX overlay. So when it comes to taking screenshots, SweetFX will save them into this DayZ PC folder when you hit print screen. And so that's all we have to do with the SweetFX files at the moment. If we go back into our DayZ SweetFX folder, there is another one called drag contents of this folder into your My Documents folder, and it contains a DayZ.config file. Now, I'd only really recommend using this .config file if the game crashes when you try to start up for the first time. If it crashes, I'd recommend you use this file. But at the moment, we're just going to try and edit our own. So we're going to click on our documents, we're going to click on DayZ, and we're going to find our own DayZ.config file. We're going to go ahead and open it with Notepad. And as you can see here, this file basically contains our window settings, our resolutions, our I think it's our color, bit depth, and things like that as well. All the basic stuff. And just for this video, I suppose I'll be able to change my settings a bit, but WinX has to be set to 0. For me, it's set to 1990 because I'm actually running across 3 screens right now, as you can see there. And I've got DayZ basically set to run in my middle screen at the X number of 1990. So you would want that to equal 0 if you're running at 1920 by 1080. And you want the WinW and the WinH to be your resolution. So in this case for me it would be 1920 by 1053, but for you it may be 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720, basically what your in-game resolution is. Very last line on the file is called windowed equals 0. It will be equal 0, and that basically means it's running in full screen, but we want it to well, you do have the option to run it in windowed mode or full screen mode. but I'd recommend you change your windowed resolution to 1920 by 1080. For this video I'm going to run the game in windowed mode simply because it's a lot more beneficial. As I said before, there's an issue with SweetFX and DayZ that if you run the game in full screen and try to Alt-Tab, the game will crash. This can be avoided by running the game in a borderless window mode. So once we've edited our DayZ.config file, we're basically good to go. Although, as I said, if you do start up the game and you get an error, you can drag the one I've provided into here, and hopefully it'll work for you. There are a few additional steps that you can take that are provided in the DayZ Standalone folder, such as editing your graphics card settings as well for DayZ. I've even provided NVIDIA screenshots on what your settings probably should be, but this is entirely optional. The game SweetFX should run without this. So since we've installed SweetFX and we've edited our DayZ.config file to run in a borderless window, we can basically start DayZ now. So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and you will notice again that my taskbar will be showing. This is a disadvantage of running in a borderless window, but it allows you to Alt-Tab. And now when we start up DayZ, you will notice a slight difference in colour, or hopefully a big difference in colour. And just to demonstrate that SweetFX does work, I will be toggling it with the F11 button. So as you can see, we've got a character here. The graphics look pretty reasonable. If I was to hit F11, you can see how much more dull it looks. Again, you can see the shadows are enabled. If I hit it again, it's a lot darker, it's a lot more realistic looking. One thing I'd recommend that you do personally is that you edit your brightness and your gamma settings to suit you. As you can see, it does change the game quite a bit. I think I'll leave it around there. As well as your bloom settings, you can completely change the bloom if you have your post-processing enabled. I prefer it around there, very realistic. Just for this video, I suppose I'll join a random server for you guys. Click play. This is a hardcore server, I'm not too sure. But this is also hopefully compatible with the Arma 2 mod of DayZ, since DayZ Standalone and Arma 2 are actually pretty similar. Hopefully this will actually load. Okay, so here we are, we're in a game right now. I think this is a hardcore game. It does run very well on my graphics card and the settings that I'm running on. I'll just pull out an assault rifle, just so you guys can see, have a look at what it's like. And I'll disable SweetFX now. You can see the big difference. I'll disable that too. I'll enable it again, and I will change my. Oops, sorry, my mouse is a bit sensitive. I'll change my my brightness settings. You can see the difference. If I was to do that with SweetFX enabled, there isn't that much of a difference. As well with your bloom, it does make a big difference as well. That's basically on what you prefer. But you will hopefully notice that the game does run a lot smoother, and this is simply because the game doesn't use the in-game anti-aliasing, which is poorly optimised. There's no doubt about it, they do need to fix it. Although that's to be expected as soon as the game's an alpha game. This is a hardcore server, so I can't really show you guys a third-person view. As I said before though, there are a few disadvantages to using SweetFX. Although the game runs better, if you do try to Alt-Tab while running DayZ in full screen, it will crash. Which is why I like to run it in windowed mode, because it means I can do things like that and then go back to the game without it crashing. It's very instant. Another thing that should be noted is the SweetFX file that I'm using is actually available on a website called sfx.thelazynet, and this website basically provides a bunch of different SweetFX presets. Most of them are designed for different games, but the one I was using in this video was by someone called Unique Boy, apparently, and this was designed for Dishonored, the game, but I'm using it in DayZ Standalone, and you can see the comparison screenshots right here. And that's that really. That's how you get SweetFX installed. And as I said before, if you ever want to, I'll just demonstrate how the game can crash, just so you guys are fully aware that you need to use this at your own discretion. If I was to try and change my rendering resolution, I'm pretty sure the game's going to crash when I set this. As you can see, the game does crash. This is the kind of error that you will get. So if you're going to change your rendering resolution or disable or enable any specific settings, I'd recommend that you go back into your DayZ file folder. Where is it? Go into your DayZ folder, get that d3d9.dll file and just drag it somewhere else, and you'll be able to edit all the things you need. And to get DayZ SweetFX running again, just go ahead and drag it back in, and that's that. So hopefully I've covered everything you need to know. There will also be instructions in the RAR file, and hopefully that's everything covered. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.